Have you ever thought of a certain possibility that could happen in real life, but as you start to think about it more and more, it concludes itself as an impossibility? Or have you ever seen a drawing or structure that looks impossible to exist in real life, but still exists nonetheless? Those are paradoxes. Paradoxes are antinomies, a mutual incompatibility of two laws, a logically self-contradictory statement that runs contrary to one's expectation. In other words, a statement that is seemingly valid but leads to an incorrect conclusion, an invalid argument. Paradoxes comes in many forms, such as logical paradoxes, perspective-based paradoxes, philosophical paradoxes, and paradoxes that involves medicine, which is known as paradoxical reactions. Paradoxes have their own functions, each different to their own categories. Logical ones and philosophical ones promote critical thinking between scholars and philosophers alike, while other paradoxes functions as premises or start to an argument that reveals the errors in previous knowledge, thus causing the re-evaluations of logic and axioms. One of the functions of paradoxes in general can be summed up in a quote from a book named Philosophical Fragments. But one must not think ill of the paradox, for the paradox is the passion of thought, and the thinker without the paradox is like the lover without the passion, a mediocre fellow. But the ultimate potentiation of every passion is always to will its own downfall, and so it is also the ultimate passion of the understanding to will the collision. Although in one way or another, the collision must become its downfall. This, then, is the ultimate paradox of thought, to want to discover something that thought itself cannot think. 3 examples of paradoxes that will be shown in this video will be the liar paradox, the grandfather's paradox. Let's start with the simplest one, liar paradox. The premise is that a liar states that he or she is lying. If he is indeed lying, then he is telling the truth, which in turn means that his statement was a lie. A simpler analogy can be summed as, a man claims that all men are liars. Was his statement a lie because he was also a man, or was it true because he was a man that lied? The conclusion becomes a contradiction where such a statement will be deemed as both true and false, thus making it a paradox. If this sentence is false, is true, then it is false. But the sentence states that it is false, and if it's false, then it must be true, and so on. The next one is the grandfather paradox, which lies within the topic of time traveling. The grandfather paradox is a paradox where inconsistencies emerge through time traveling. The name comes from a common description. A person travels back to the past and kills their grandfather before the conception of their father or mother, thus preventing their parents' existence and their own. According to logic, if the person successfully travels back into the past and kills their grandfather, then he would be unable to do so in the first place, as he never existed, since his grandfather died and his parents were never born. But if he was never born to kill his own grandfather through time traveling, then he would still exist. This logic makes the whole time travel a paradox, an impossibility that goes infinitely. There are many other types of paradoxes that are either fascinating to think about or just downright insanity, but enjoyable to understand nonetheless. They explored the limits of logic and thinking since 400 BC, whether it's in the Greek empires of the West or the Chinese dynasties of the East, and is still relevant during the modern age among scholars and philosophers alike, as it heavily promotes and acts as practices for critical thinking, and to attempt to understand the unknowns within this universe. Paradoxes could even function as inspirations for various literary works, exploring its ideas in new innovative ways using books or arts, or just function as hobbies to keep the mind active and serve as stimuli to improve our mind.